Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first residential aged care breakout. We have three excellent leaders to take us through this discussion. We have Ian Thorley on my far left, who is a care consultant, but prior to being a care consultant, he was one of the leaders, or the leader of Estia, and prior to that, Opal, at various levels. We have Stephen Becsi, who is the CEO of Apollo Care, and previous to that, he was CEO of Bethany in West Australia. And then, of course, we have Grant Corderoy. And the subject that we wish to discuss today is residential care. How will the Taskforce recommendations change my RAC business, and what will it? How am I going to capitalise on it? Now, we did have a discussion a couple of days ago on this subject, and I expect both Ian and Steve in particular are going to catapult off in different directions, but that'll all be good. So, gentlemen, the task force, how is that going to change the business of aged care? I'm going to ask the two operators, or past operators rather than you, Grant. And
are we live?
Yes, you're on. So, Ian, your last significant role was CEO of Estia.
Correct.
And prior to that, you were...
I was the Chief Operating Officer.
Chief Operating Officer.
Prior to that, I was the Chief Operating Officer at Opal. So,
yes.
And before that, 40 years in hospital. So, a 50-year healthcare career.
So, do you think you know what you're talking about?
Not sure.
So, the task force recommendations, it's a significant change. So that'll be a significant change for individuals operating their businesses, but I know that you have views on how it's going to actually change the sector.
I think it's going to have a profound impact on the sector, in that if you look at the Royal Commission, there are a number of things that were put in place to create competitive markets. There was the role of the regulator, there was consumer information by way of star ratings and various things like that. And the other important element of creating a competitive market was the changes coming about this year on the 1st of July with what you'd call unregulated supply, or that licensing reform. So that's the element of a competitive market, but of course that's a bit of an abstract concept unless there is financial sustainability. And one could see an appropriate response from the government in respect of the task force recommendations to have that financial sustainability that will lead to a competitive market. So what happens in a competitive market? Who are the winners? The customer. And what we would see is the aged care sector behave like the Australian healthcare sector, where it's highly, highly competitive, or the Australian economy, rather than this protection that the licensing system has put in place for so long, where there's been underinvestment. And, if Ian Yates was in the room, he'd probably say, as he said many times in the past, there are 30% of the operators that shouldn't be there. So this will create that competitive market. Consumers will benefit, and that can only be a good thing. In competitive markets, two things generally occur. You survive in providing products that are valued, that are high quality, and are value for money. And from that, what do we see in the broad economy? Innovation and all of the things that go back to consumer benefit.
And we should be clear that small operators can be competitive in a local market?
Oh, look, I think that's a really important observation. I do think there's a number of things about what we do that favour scale. That highly regulated environment in which we work and the like. And I think if you've got scale, you can probably have a competitive advantage. But as we see in the other parts of the economy, you can be highly successful if you run a business in a particular way, and that's that consumer focus. If you've got something that is particularly sought after, in terms of quality and all of the, drivers of a market, you don't have to be a behemoth. You can be, boutique and agile and the like. And again, the response that we'd all like to see from government in regard.
Excuse me. Right. Try again.
Hello, back again. Very good. The appropriate response from the government would see, the opportunity of operators at all scales succeed, but it really does favour those operators with an absolute customer-centric laser focus on the customer.
So if I could summarise that for how it would change your business, the Taskforce recommendations, if you were a smaller business, you've spoken in the past of boutique businesses, you would become a very, very marketing, services-oriented boutique business, very, very strong in a local area. And then if you were a large business, you would be because it's difficult to be up close and personal in every market that you're in, and then you're going to have really strong systems and efficiencies, and look for areas where you could give product variation, whether it be in pricing or whether it be services, etc.
Absolutely. And again, you see many examples in the broader economy on how small, niched, call it boutique, but highly skilled operators can compete with, larger, bigger scale operators. The challenge will be for people who might have skinny balance sheets, because of course with a more competitive market, some of the observations that were made by ACFA in their last report about a large percentage of the market having underinvested over a period of time, and making comments about the attributes, the physical attributes of what's going to be required in the future. Those operators will be at risk. You can probably see a period of time, Chris, where given the tightness that is existing in the market at the present time, and the flood of baby boomers coming through, there will be a period of time before this all sorts its way through. But it will be a very customer-driven, competitive market that will shape the way the provider world pans out.
So as Grant said on the podium earlier today, it'll be up to 3 years. So you've got perhaps 3 years to get to be fighting fit?
Well, that's essentially the cycle, isn't it, of getting a development planned through the authorities and commissioned. But yes, I think if you're in a market where there's been underinvestment, 3 years is probably a reasonable period of time of grace that you might have.
period of grace. Stephen?
Well, you know, I mean from the competitive perspective,
Yeah.
not the regulative perspective.
So, Stephen, you've got 11 locations in regional areas, all of them presenting themselves as individual small businesses. What's this going to do for you at the Taskforce Recommendations?
Okay, well firstly the theme of this summit is optimism, so keep that in mind. The task force was brilliant. It's going to help providers, the ones that do survive. Step back a little bit and look at our own organisation. We were a concept 3.5 years ago. We're now obviously stretching all up and down the East Coast. But if you look at the organisations that have come in to Apollo Care, a bunch, and the majority were in financial distress. Task Force, fantastic. There is a bunch that were sanctioned for clinical and other reasons, which led to financial distress. That's painful. But recently, organisations that are in the bush are running good operations, so they're cutting their teeth, and they've got accreditation. So you're looking at them, why are they coming into the Alliance? Primarily because of the sheer volume of reforms going through. The directors have attended the Reform for Governance seminars that are being run by, the Commission, KPMG, and these local town boards that are good-hearted people are saying aged care and the way it is going with all this regulation is not a game that we should be in. So they're actually now beginning to extract themselves out and going into organisations that are set up with the proper governance, all the requirements and the balance sheet, etc., to be able to survive. So these parochial regional areas very much love their own communities. They want everything to remain the same, but work out how to keep that, but also be a reasonably sophisticated player. So you've got to come up with different models. But on that theme of optimism, and we spoke about this last week, I'd like to also put some challenges out there to all the parties that are in the game of aged care. Facilities that we're acquiring in regional Australia right now are talking agency levels greater than 50%. Why? No one wants to live in the bush. So you don't have the people there. Or if they are there, they've gone to the hospital where if you're in Queensland, you've been given a $30,000 bonus to go to acute rather than aged care. All these things are playing out. And remember, I'm speaking from the behalf of a provider on the ground. Very real. So you have a situation where you've got the government and the departments and everyone saying, we want innovation, let's bring high tech in, and boy are we bringing that in with the capital we've got. We're in the cloud, we don't have a head office, everything's in the cloud. We have facilities in the bush that are running greater than 50%. We have ANAC that's been created that says we, the taxpayer, will pay for the staff to provide the care, but no provider. If you have agency, that